radiological fallout, people living around potential targets such as military bases and chemical plants may be advised to evacuate.
Well, hello, Sublation Media viewers, Sublation Media readers, sublators. This is the Culture Corner for the month with, we need a name. Did we ever come up with a name for this show, Nina?
No, not yet, but we need one. I think you had 21st century literature or something, but that's very neutral.
Yeah, this is the 21st century literary hour. I'm Douglas Lain. I am also a novelist as well as the head of Sublation Media, author of, let's see, After the Saucers Landed. It's one I'll pick to mention. With me is Nina Power. Nina, you want to introduce yourself?
Sure. I'm also a writer. I do write fiction and poetry, but much less than I write nonfiction. I do a lot of art criticism. And I've written a couple of nonfiction books. The most recent would be What Do Men Want, which is about the sort of so-called crisis in masculinity, but really it's a defense of men and women being together.
I'm glad you're out there doing that, Nina. As a cishet white male, I appreciate your efforts. And today Ben Kostival is with us.
Yes.
Ben, you are the author of the Canyons and a novel called The Parrot.
Mm-hmm.
And is there a third novel that I'm forgetting?
The first one is actually Almond North,
yeah.
right? So this is from 2017. The Canyons is from 2018, I think.
Mm-hmm.
And then The Parrot is from last year, 2024.
Yes. If I would pick a favorite cover, it would be the elm with that face on it. With I quite like that one.
That painting is by an artist who just passed recently, a couple of years ago. His name's Mel McCudden. And when I finished that book, I Googled crossing guard painting, and that's what came up because the book, the protagonist in it is a crossing guard, and I thought that's the guy. So I reached out, I did some Googling around, and I reached out to a gallery. There's a gallery in Idaho that has basically all of his paintings, or it's like a repository of his paintings. And I said, well, I'll ask them if I could use the image. And I thought they would say either no way or yes, but give us $50,000, or I would never hear anything from them. They said, yes, but please send us 5 copies of the book. And
that's a great deal.
So, it's a lesson for anyone out there who's writing or doing the arts in some way. Always ask. The worst thing that happens is they say no. And
right. What was the name of that painter again?
Mel McCudden. And I used to have on my website, but I don't have it anymore. If you Google his name on YouTube, there's an 8 or 9 minute video of him actually creating a painting in his studio, it's really fascinating to watch. So Mel McCudden, check out his work.
That's a lovely story. It is a fantastic cover for the novel, and I wanted to just sort of introduce you a little bit more formally with a sort of brief bio. So you were born and raised in Pennsylvania, but you lived all over the place, including in Alaska, and you've had many, many different jobs. And I think especially in the first novel in Almond North, that kind of experience maybe comes through in the accounts of crossing children across the road, bus driving most prominently, but many other things.
Drawn from life.
Huh?
Drawn from life.
Oh wow. Well, yeah. I mean, I think that makes sense. I mean, it's very convincing as a description of what it is actually like to drive a school bus and to deal with students and so on. So yeah, so your fiction has appeared in a number of different places. You're currently in Boston, and there was this great quote which I really liked, and I think it's very fitting. Maybe later we'll talk a bit about how you approach writing, but it says Ben enjoys reading, sitting quietly, being calm, and remaining motionless for hours at a time. I know, totally. I love that. It's absolutely wonderful. And
stillness, yes, stillness is one of my favorite things.
yes, and it's so unusual, it's so hard. And yeah, I mean, maybe just to say a couple of things about your novels, which I very much enjoyed, like all three of them.
Thank you.
Yeah, and particularly the Parrot, I find that was really mind-bending and super interesting, and taps into some things I'm interested in, particularly birds, because I'm completely obsessed with birds. And anyway, but to give a general introduction before I go into, my impression of the kind of characters, they're sort of anti-heroes. I mean, they kind of conjure up ideas. I mean, particularly in the first and the third one, the Canyons is a slightly different type of novel. They are all very different from one another, but I think particularly in Elmwood North and the Parrot, these kind of male anti-heroes who are reaching crises point, right? There are various sort of crises in the novel where there are sort of breakdowns. There's a kind of John Kennedy O'Toole, like Confederacy of Dunces, I think, particularly in the first novel, a little bit, this kind of the absurdity of existence. The protagonist, Maurice Prout, who's the main character in Elmwood North, is suffering from a kind of degenerative chronic bone illness. You have to remind me the name.
FOP, or fibrodysplasia ossificans progressiva. And it is unfortunately a very real disease. It's rare, but it's the genetic mutation of a single gene. And what happens to you if you have this gene is that any injury to your soft tissue replaces itself with bone. And so over time, just in the general course of life, as injuries pile up, your soft tissue becomes skeletal. And if it progresses to, depending on how far it progresses, you can become immobile, or even in an extreme case, almost like a statue. There is research, of course, ongoing about this disease, but it's luckily very rare. But it is located on a single gene, which we have in common with the housefly, the common housefly. So it goes very far back in evolutionary history. So yes.
Yeah, and it's a sort of amazing and kind of tragic premise for the novel, but really the tragedy of Prout's life is in a way less his condition than his emotional crises and even sexual crises, the sort of lust. There's an amazing scene about lusting after teenage girls on the bus, and the sort of awfulness of this sort of being trapped in your own desire, as we all are, right? Like this kind of horrible imprisoning quality of that. And yeah, the difficulty of having relationships. And also I think your characters exhibit this sort of obsessive quality, it has to be said. I mean, both Prout and the kind of narrator of the Parrot are men who are absolutely obsessive. Obsessive letter writers, obsessive kind of researchers, encyclopedists, sort of pursuers after truth. But it's kind of truth that is become kind of cracked and warped, and it doesn't fit into the normality of life, right, of modern day life. They're kind of adventurers in knowledge, but they're sort of out of time as well as kind of out of sorts. Yeah, so I don't know, Doug, if you wanted to add a few comments on the Canyons, just as an opener, or
sure. Well, listen, when I began to read the Canyon, what I thought of it as most of all, was uh, historical fiction,
Indeed, yes.
because it's very much about the the Colorado Coalfield War, um, which was not. I mean, I'm from Colorado. I grew up in Colorado Springs,
Hmm.
so I sort of was vaguely aware
Yeah,
of
not too far.
this,
Not too far.
right? But it happened before my time.
Right.
Just got a
Yes.
couple of years. But it's actually it was world historic.
Yeah.
The Colorado Coalfield War, because what came out of it was the Ludlow
Right.
massacre,
Right.
where Woodrow Wilson sent in the National Guard and murdered the striking workers.
Hmm.
And so it, it, I'm gonna I'm gonna indulge myself for a minute. When I've written fiction, often enough that had to do with the mythology of the left.
Hmm.
Like I wrote a short story about the free speech movement
Hmm.
at Berkeley. So
And
this
Billy
seems to me
Moon
to kind
too.
of
I read that. I enjoyed that very
oh,
much.
did you? Yeah, right. And Billy Moon, right. So this is in line with that. It's like you're taking up a world historic moment from the struggles of the left and creating a work of fiction around it to kind of, and I think it's important to do, because it's how the memory of the struggle for socialism is passed down from one generation to the next, taken up, processed, and then passed down. So I appreciated that, but I wanted to ask you. This is sort of a question that is off the side of the novel itself, which is, how did you get a blurb from Howard Zinn? When did you start to write this novel?
Uh,
Is
th-
another way to put it.
Again, this is a lesson for anyone who's writing out there, anyone in the arts. I wrote him a letter, and I asked him.
Hmm.
The that book, I started writing that in the late '90s. I was
Hmm.
finishing it up around 2005, 2006, and of course he was still alive then.
Right.
So I wrote him a letter and I told him what I was up to, and I sent him a chapter or two, and he corresponded with me and gave me the sentence that you see there, and then it
Hmm.
took 11 years to find a publisher.
Right. Hmm.
So one person asked me about that book. How did you get a blurb from Howard Zinn, considering that he died, 2
In
years or whatever,
2010,
3 years before it was, however, right, 2010, so years
eight,
before,
8 years. Yeah.
8 years. So, and I said, well, it took 11 years to find a publisher. But I'm a letter writer, and I'm just old enough that letter writing remains the natural mode for me. And so I'll send a letter to anyone, anywhere in the world. If I read something that they like, or sorry, read something by them that I like,
Hmm.
I might send them a letter. Or if it's a show I've seen, or, if I get the impulse, I'll send it. And one of the curious things about being my age, which is you see things come back around again. And
Hmm.
so, for instance, vinyl records, I never would have thought vinyl records would come back. And now
Hmm.
they've taken over. And the nature of electronic media is such that uh, people are overwhelmed every day with messages and emails and DMs and everything else. And I found that the paper letter is uh, is the best technology. Now, most of the time you don't hear anything back from people, which I don't. That's the nature of life. I have no hard feelings about it.
Hmm.
But when I do hear something back, it's almost always in response to a paper letter.
Really,
I would
I was going to ask. You say you send a letter. You don't mean an email that's
No,
nicely
no, no.
composed.
Now, of course, I would never write it in my handwriting because my handwriting is the terrifying scrawl of a psychopath. But I type it up, and
Mhm.
if they have an, even I opt for the paper letter, even if it's somebody who's just a professor or, and has an email right there on the site. I send them a paper letter because I know they're going to get 50 emails that day. They're not going to get any paper letters. And also I find it exhausting just in my own life to try to read anything more than a sentence or two off of a screen. And so if there's an article online that I want to read, I'll often print it out, read it hard copy. I just find it easier on my eye. Now, that just could be my age, but
you mentioned your age twice. Are you and I about the same age?
Yeah, I'm 51. So
okay,
we're about the same.
It hits hard, doesn't it? You hit 50
well,
and then suddenly it's all you think about.
You have to manage it.
A bit about the letters. It's absolutely beautiful what you're saying. And indeed, in the first novel, Maurice Prout is a obsessive letter writer, and he's writing in particular to a doctor who he somehow both thinks has the solution and the answer to his problem, but also doesn't really want him to know anything about him. Like Prout doesn't want to become a kind of part of any scientific experiment, but the doctor is like the world expert in his disease. But there's this kind of tragic scene or comic tragic scene where Prout eventually makes it to find the doctor in real life on this sort of quest, and he's confronted with these three sort of archives or boxes of all of his letters that he sent, and the reader suddenly realizes just how obsessive the main character is. And because in an early letter he says
letters like that, trust me. If I don't get a reply, I don't send. I don't barrage.
This is the thing, he keeps on writing, and in an early letter he says something kind of, oh well, I don't even want to respond, so I don't even want to be read. So they haven't read the letters, and he's just confronted with this sort of mass of time spent. And I think there's these sort of realizations in the novels, like the sort of the male characters have these kind of revelations that they've taken a wrong turn or several wrong turns, or they haven't understood something. And I think I really wanted to read a couple of passages, just short passages, if you don't mind. It's probably a bit strange to have someone else read it.
But no, I'd rather you read it than me.
Okay, so one thing that's really worth noting, I think, is your incredibly refined use of language, and you're using a lot of words that are not in common use, and there's something very, I wouldn't say baroque exactly, but it's deliberately wordy in a way. You're often using kind of technical terms or unusual terms or very abstruse ways of phrasing things, but sometimes there's also a kind of great humor in that as well. So I just wanted to read a very short part of chapter 17 from Elmwood North, which is about Prout as the bus driver. So this is his job, which is very realistically described, the kind of what it's like to drive a school bus, which is, after all, one of the kind of archetypical images of America that we have. Like, we don't have those same buses, the yellow bus. Really? No, so it's like they're in The Simpsons, and it's very American, this image of the bus, I think. But here is Prout referring to one of his child passengers. I think he was very young, actually. So they loaded by ones and twos, thankfully not all at once in a sticky horde. "Morning, Chief," Prout said to his first passenger at the bottom of a cul-de-sac. "Have a seat." "No," squeaked the boy, feet planted, one hand on hip, the other raised high with an emphatic index finger pointed right at Prout's face. And Prout thought, I don't know why I should have expected different. Who better to complicate my midday hours than a sallow, bat-faced boy like this, a fetal Hitler with skin as translucent as a sandwich bag, maladjusted glasses, and a body 2 sizes too small for his age? I wanted distraction and something to occupy my thoughts, so next time I'll be careful what I wish for. Okay, so this is one example of your prose, and I wanted to read a tiny bit of the parrot, where so the parrot is a kind of one man's obsessive quest or interaction with the parrot. And I personally also very interested in parrots because we have lots of green parrots in London, and I spend a lot of time looking at the parrots and thinking about the parrots. So I was predisposed to be very pro this.
They
Pro book.
they will lead the revolution when
Parrots.
the animals get it together. I
Yes.
think that the parrots are.
I don't disagree. So, but one of the things that the main character in the Parrot does, and he's kind of a coder, so he's a very sort of intelligent man, and he's constantly solving problems, and people give him kind of leeway because he's, I guess, a sort of tech genius or something like this, right? And there's a kind of lot of commentary on the Promethean dimension of our tech present, I think, in this novel. And so one of the things he does is periodically take DMT, I guess it's called the molecule in the book, and partly this kind of leads him on to higher things, right? Like it kind of and he has this familiarity with the DMT universe, which he refers to as the dome. And here is a description from near the end of I think what is his final encounter with the molecule. And he takes the drug in front of his family for the first time. This is unusual as well for various reasons. I won't go into why he thinks this is a good idea. Assuming this is not also part of a larger kind of fantasy. And the book loops in this clever way in relation to the journal and so on. But I'm just going to read this. He fleets into the rocambolesque, Fauvist intensities he has entered so many times before, the neon palettes in crisp geometries that dazzle and transfix and overwhelm him. How can he pioneer this measureless tremendum? He drops into the oniric calyx of the vapour as all distinctions egress from the workday. No fear yet added to the fear he has long nurtured, but the breeding colours so dim in luminosity brindle and fade in luxuriance. And lo, cachexia, I can't say that word.
Cachexia.
What is cachexia?
Like a wizening, a drying out and a bleeding out of the colors.
The intercalated, sempiternal frameworks of the dome jettison their intuguments and disaggregate. He does not feel tenuted in a flosculating network of lightstone dolmens that harmonize with space-time. And, this incredibly beautiful description of that experience of DMT. And it's very hard, famously, to write about taking drugs or, medicine or chemicals, whatever you want to say. Just as it's very hard to write about sex in any convincing way, but I think you manage to do both. And I really like the kind of experimental excesses of the Parrot as a sort of, I suppose Moby Dick quest in a way. Now I think about it, you're paying homage to the.
Well, you put your finger on the problem that I gave myself with the Parrot, which is how do you describe in words something that can't be described in words, which is psychedelic experience. And so but there's a deeper element to that, because even though psychedelics and DMT, I call it just the molecule because I shortened the nickname of DMT from the spirit molecule, just called it the molecule. But that's obviously foregrounded in the book, but the book is substantially about anxiety and dread. And one of the people who gave me a blurb for it, Stephen Moore, the great scholar of the novel, Stephen Moore, in a longer section, which I couldn't fit on the book, he described it as an intellectual panic attack. And I thought that that captures it for the coder, that's the situation that he's in. And so for technical reasons, I had a big problem there, because first of all, you have to get the psychedelic experience into the text in some way that conveys the strangeness of it, but also to get the flavor of anxiety and dread into it. And anyone who's ever suffered anxiety or dread or panic attack knows that stillness and is just nowhere in it. So in that book, all verbs of being are excised except for in conversation. So there's no is, was, were in the narration, and the narration should reflect the coder's consciousness.
Mm.
And when you do that, you have to do the work of verbs of being with syntax and other verbs.
Mm.
And so if readers see the way that the sentences have very strange constructions, and you got a sense of it even in the short section you read, the way the verbs work, they're doing the work of what verbs of being would do in ordinary circumstances, but the coder's circumstances are not ordinary. And so the language reflects not only, or this is my intent, obviously the intent doesn't matter. It's the only thing that matters is the execution. So readers would have to judge, but the intent is that the style reflects not just the psychedelic experience, but also the coder's consciousness. And that's analogous in Elman North too, that those are words that Prout knows, but it doesn't really matter if the reader knows them, if the book is constructed correctly, because the story should just carry you right past that. And the sense that you should be left with, again, this is my intent, is that, well, yes, he would know this, or yes, this reflects his consciousness, even though it might not be my vocabulary or my consciousness. And of course, the Canyons is very different in that way. It's more straightforward as compared to Elman North and the Parrot. And the book that should come out next is very stripped down, very straightforward. So there's none of that of what you see in those books. Go ahead.
Nina, could you read another section of exposition now that we've heard the literary trick being deployed in the text?
Oh, yeah, sure. I mean, I should also note for people who haven't yet picked up the Parrot, it's one paragraph. It's 145 pages with no paragraph breaks. It's one continuous experience, if you like, or trip.
And again, a technical reason for that, because the coder's situation is relentless, which is what it feels like when you're in anxiety and dread and a panic attack. It feels like you cannot get out and it's never going to end. And it seemed to me the book should reflect that. The form of the book should reflect that. So his situation is relentless. So the book is relentless. In the Canyons, for instance, that's why none of the bits that are in foreign languages, those aren't translated for the reader, because Baxter, the protagonist, he doesn't understand them. So you're living the situation as Baxter lives it, and he has to pick up from physical context in those situations what's being said to him. If the one character who's something of a translator isn't there, he has to figure it out for himself. And you don't have, if you're a reader, you don't have to figure it out. It's just you're in the position that the protagonist is in. So
yeah, that's really effective. And yeah, I mean, I did look up quite a lot of words actually that I didn't know. Not the one I read last.
I hope the story carries people past that if they're not inclined to do that. So
no, I think it does. Okay. It absolutely does. But there's something kind of very, intriguing. You're like, well, I want to know what this exciting word means, and why shouldn't we use more words? I mean, or the characters use them. I mean, these are all well, they're both extremely autodidactic characters as well, and they're extremely intelligent, right? So okay, I'm just going to read another bit. So the narrator in The Parrot also suffers terribly from insomnia, and he is kind of violent in his sleep. To the sort of detriment of his long-suffering wife, who really does long suffer with his very precocious and cute children as well. But okay, let's read about a bit from here. And then he starts to become obsessed with this parrot that he sees in the world. But so here we go. His depressurized mental space makes way for its rightful tenants: family, work, gustation, secretion, conversation, and slumbration. Over a number of nights, he experiences uninterrupted sleep from pillow impact to alarm blast. Sleep that mimics inebriation despite his sobriety, which waxed as his vigils waned. He traces the palliation to hoarded and unrelieved exhaustion, an untremulous bridge across the autumnal equinox. October days, then echo of summer, warm his grasp for another coppicing. The last until spring, he assumes, though the shifting climate means he can't scry with conviction. Knock the liberal Brahmins for plenty, but for denialism about Earth's thermal throes, head to Branson, his synecdoche for the entire country beyond the major cities, Middle America, the land of incurious dopes. So yeah, I mean that's really 10 lines of extraordinary use of language.
I like the way you read it much better than I would have, so I'm glad you read it.
Well, I don't know. It's very alluring, I think, and also I like that the characters are so imperfect. Like they have horrible thoughts. They really are quite snobby in some ways. You know, they think they're great in some ways when they're not, and the sort of rage and the bizarreness of their actions, actually, especially in the Parrot, you know, where no one can quite decide if this very intelligent coder is insane or is it a kind of spiritual crisis? Is it psychological? And I think all of those sorts of institutions we have, like the therapeutic, you know, there are some things which can't be sort of solved, I suppose, by the modern set of institutions, and I think that's really raised here as well. Like, you know, what do we do when someone is acting in such an abnormal way or becomes so obsessive, or, you know, but in other ways is very normal. And I think the anxiety, I don't personally suffer from anxiety at all, and I know a lot of writers do. I suffer from other things, but it's not that. And I wonder, you know, when you talk about on your self-description as calm, you know, seeking calmness or spending a lot of time in calm states, is this a kind of protective measure, protective of yourself, of your writing? How does that feature?
I would say probably. Part of it is training. I was a school bus driver for a while. I still have a license. I'm not currently doing it right now, but the license was hard enough to get that I keep it. They'll bury me with it. It'll be in my hand. So, and one of the things that training to drive a school bus does for you is it trains you to be calm in just about any situation. So even if a bomb goes off in the back of the bus, you have to pull the bus over and put the emergency brake on before you can figure out what's going on. So I am a very calm person, but being, trying to carry forward with these projects that take years, and in some cases many years to finish, naturally produces anxiety, because, as you might imagine, these are not commercial blockbusters when they come out. So you have to balance time, trying to find time to read and write and edit against making just enough money to not get evicted. And so in terms
Life of a writer.
Yeah.
Yeah,
it's I don't recommend it. So, I've been doing it a long time, but I want
to ask you a technical question.
Go ahead.
Okay. All right. So,
absolutely.
you decided in the Parrot to forego to be verbs in the exposition.
Mm-hmm.
But you also decided to write the text in the third person.
Mm-hmm.
And so it seems to me that if it had been written in the first person, then that decision to forego to be verbs would have perhaps been more accentuated, and it also would have been more directly reflecting the state of consciousness of the protagonist. But instead, it's I think there's a paranoid quality to it when you
Mm-hmm.
have it written in the third person, because now this is some outside narrator setting up the terms for the consciousness of the narrator for the protagonist. So how did you come to decide to write in the third person?
Well, you're right. The paranoia aspect of it is definitely there because the coder's state of mind is such that like referring to himself in the third person seemed more in keeping with his state of excitation.
Oh,
The
okay.
other technical aspect of it is, in my view, you have to be very, very careful with first person. Uh, First person really only depends on how compelling is that voice. And if you don't hear the first person coming through in a voice that can really carry an entire book, you need to be very careful about using it because it's a dangerous shortcut
Mm.
uh, to intimacy for between the book and the reader. So I think a lot of writers tend to use it because it gets a lot of work done for them that's harder to do in third person, but their first person voice doesn't necessarily justify itself in terms of how compelling it is to listen to. So a novel in first person, if it's successful, you won't care anything about, well, you might think that you care about the events in the novel or uh, the particular circumstances of it. But if it's a first person novel and it's successful, that's not what you care about. You just want to hear that person keep talking.
Mm-hmm.
And uh, you might not even be aware of it, that that's what's carrying you along. So, Elma North, for instance, that's partially in first person. And the way those sections came about was that I was working on that. I learned about that disease when I was, say, 23, 24 years old. And I thought, well, that's so strange. There must be a way to write a novel about it.
Mm.
And I didn't have an idea about how to do it for about 7 or 8 years. And I was toward the end of that driving a school bus, and I would just, when I had downtime, I would take notes and, I just had a little notebook with me. I would scribble in it. And I did that for a couple of years. And then I went back and looked through the notebook. And in one of those pages was the beginning of the first letter in Elma North, which is a gray day, doctor. Our little patch of hunched over earth has pulled up a hood of clouds, and so on like that. I don't remember writing that in the notebook, but I saw it in the notebook and I thought, that's the guy talking. And I realized that was Mo. So those sections arose in that sense because the first person voice was compelling enough for the letters, but the alternation in that book between first person and third person creates a sense of movement that, or again, the intent is to create a sense of movement where nothing much necessarily is happening. So you get the idea that there's a plot or that there are many events happening, but if you took an objective view of it, there really aren't that many events. It's one major event in that book, which is he goes to Philadelphia. And but the alternation between first and third creates that sense of movement. And in the canyons, the alternation of the structural elements of like before coming back, switching between after the strike when Baxter is alone, and during the strike going into the past. Again, that creates a sense of movement for the book. That's the intent of it. If anyone wants to pick up The Grapes of Wrath, for instance, you'll see that same structure happening where Steinbeck changes between a kind of straight narration and a more mythic. It's a very common structure in modern novels, to alternate. But to take it back to your original question, that's why I stepped away from first person in the Parrot for the paranoid aspect, and also because I thought that the narration of the psychedelic aspect of it would be better served by third person, because psychedelic experience, the nature of it is that the ego dissolves, the first person dissolves, and so you wouldn't necessarily want to foreground that when he's going into the dome, and that kept me generating the material in that way.
It's a really good point.
I think that I want to say something too about this, but about the voice of fiction and how significant it is. I think that even people kind of think that if you're writing in the third person that you aren't creating a voice, or that the voice is transparent, or
they're wrong.
You're wrong. Yeah. Also, one thing that I think I just would add to what you said is that while it's true that I think the first person has become kind of a crutch for contemporary writers, certainly when I was in writers' workshops, a lot of first person short stories would be turned in. But it is versatile. I mean, I was thinking about the Great Gatsby. That's a first person novel, not about the person telling the right. And you do care about the events in the story, but you're also, they're occluded through this first person narration. So, I should read that again with that in mind. The biggest trick of all, the worst thing to do, I did a lot when I was younger, and I still kind of like doing, is the second person. It's a total cheat.
Very difficult. Very difficult. Yeah, I might try it someday. I might try it.
I read Bright Lights, Big City, and some Lori Moore, and thought, oh, this is a great trick. You can be extremely personal when you write in the second person, when you put it all on the reader, every shitty thought you have, now it's their thought. And so you force identification onto the reader in a sense of that move, which I enjoyed trying to do a few times. All right. Sorry, Nina, go ahead.
No, it's all good. There's too much. It's sort of overflowing. I mean, I've written lots of poems in the second person, I must confess. And it is cathartic. But they're all directed at myself, especially the kind of critiques, I guess, like you did this, you did that. But I mean, this thing about the first person, I think there has been a timidity in recent years, that the first person does become this like safe place, because it's almost like, well, if I write in the first person, or if I write autofiction or kind of thin biography, then no one can criticize me, if you see what I mean, because that's my lived experience, right? And I think this is kind of part of a more general timidity or fear. Just a side question, did you feel like when Patterson came out that they were like ripping off your novel? Because
No, not at all. I love that movie, and I sent Adam Driver a letter. He never got back to me, but no hard feelings. I love that movie.
I was wondering. I sort of thought, like, when I was reading Elmwood North, I was like, did they read this for the script? Like,
no. I think I probably sent it. I might have sent it to Jim Jarmusch too after I'd seen the movie. No, not at all. It's
it's just a lovely coincidence.
That's a terrific movie. I'm not sure how many people have seen it. Patterson is the name of it, but He drives an articulated bus. I didn't graduate to that level. So
that's too technical for me. It's above my pay grade. I mean, yeah, like on the parrot thing, I just wanted to say, because we have these green parrots. We have green parakeets in London. They're feral parakeets.
Mm-hmm.
They're the only kind of parrot that can kind of somehow survive the climate.
Mm-hmm.
And they're absolutely amazing. Like I look at them every day. They sit in the tree just outside my window. They come to my balcony and they actually feed the pigeons nuts from the feeders.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm
Mm-hmm.
completely obsessed with the parakeets. And they have very funny and strange stories about why they're in the wild. Like so one of the sort of urban myths is that Jimi Hendrix let them go.
Oh, okay.
He had a pair of them.
Could be.
Them.
Could be.
Or that it was like Ealing Studios and they were filming The African Queen and they had some parakeets. So we have this kind of experience of parrots quite often in London, and they're absolutely kind of mystical.
They're mind-blowing creatures.
Yeah.
If readers or viewers, if they're interested, there's a book called Alex and Me, which the author escapes me at the moment, but she was a researcher, worked with an African gray parrot named Alex. And African grays are, by most widely agreed, the most intelligent of the species. And it just blows your mind what parrots understand. They're capable of abstract thought. And as I put in the book, let's not forget, they can talk, which is crazy. We're so used to it that it blows my mind and so that's why I think they know what's going on, and humanity might have a lot of problems if they get opposable thumbs or something through some sort of experiment. But yeah, they're amazing creatures.
Well, you posit the idea of them as emissaries or psychopomps, the sort of accompaniment to death, or they're sort of a transitional, almost angelic creature. And I think that William Blake has this experience with angels in the tree in Peckham, and I think those are birds. When he talks about the angels, I think they're a particular kind of bird. But the Alex and Me, you mentioned with this grey parrot, this kind of psychologist and this African grey parrot, is by Irene Pepperberg. And the last words apparently of Alex the parrot were, "You be good, I love you."
Yeah.
Which is
unbelievable. Yeah, he died tragically. He was sick, or parrots, of course, anyone who's interested in birds knows that they can live 100 years, 120 years. I mean, they're amazing. And Alex died, I think, at like 30 or 40 because he got sick. But that's a terrific book to look into for anyone who's interested in the nonfiction or scientific side of it.
I want to ask you questions about your writing career, or how you chose to write, or what you've done to get to the point where you've written these novels. So you've been writing since the 90s at least, because that's when the Canyons was written. Did you decide that you wanted to pursue fiction writing when you were young?
No. I was always a reader. And my undergrad is actually in physics and math. And I was kind of a goof off in high school. I was probably a B student. I just didn't do much. And I went to college, and I got reprogrammed to a large degree. And so I pursued the sciences. But one of the aspects of the sciences that you learn pretty quickly when you go in them is that the analog I like to make, or the analogy I like to make, is to musical instruments. So anyone can learn how to play any musical instrument to a certain level just by pounding away at it, practicing. But you reach a point where you realize that you're just never going to get beyond whatever level you're at, and yet there are other people who are just wired for it in a way that you're not. And the sciences are like that, at least math and physics are, and you learn pretty quickly whether you have the wiring or whether you don't. I did not. I had the wiring to hang on by my bleeding fingernails and get my undergrad in it, but I knew I was not going anywhere beyond that with it. But as I said, I was always a reader of everything. And while I was at college, I was doing, I figured, well, I'll do an English minor. And in my senior year, I just needed 2 more credits to finish the minor. And there was a course on Faulkner. I'd never heard of Faulkner. I'd never read any Faulkner, but it had 2 credits. And so I said, well, let me take that course. And it changed my life. I don't write like Faulkner. Nobody does, of course. But I had never encountered writing like Faulkner's before, and it was evident to me that that there was more going on there, just entire universes more going on there than just telling a story or trying to entertain people. And I thought, oh, this just had a revolutionary effect on me as to what writing was and what books were and who writers were. And so I thought after that, I graduated and I thought, well, if I worked very hard at it, I could write. I believe that about myself. And I also believe that I could make something of myself as a writer, career-wise. I was right about the first thing, but I was so wrong about the second thing, which is the lesson every writer learns in terms of career.
There's time yet. We're going to make you.
Well, we'll see. We'll see.
Well, you really just have to set your. I mean, you have to take your successes and hold them close to your heart.
You recalibrate. Yes.
Yeah. I relate. I mean, I figured I was destined to be the next Vonnegut or something like that. It hasn't quite happened.
Yeah.
But so did you? Have you written some short fiction? Did you try submitting short stories for a while?
Oh yes. And by the way, I didn't have grand illusion, or I don't think I did. I didn't have grand illusions. I thought, well, I'd be able to get some short stories published, and maybe I could, I don't know, get some freelance gigs or whatever. In terms of, I didn't have grand career ambitions. I did used to write short stories, and I just could not get them published. I got one published in 2001 by accident because one of my old teachers sent it in for me for a contest. He didn't even tell me, and it was one of the winners of that contest that got published. It took me another 8 years to publish another story that was in the New England Review. And then the last story that I was able to get published was in 2016 in Epoch, which is the literary journal of Cornell. And that took 17 years to get published.
Look, I mean, like if you are trying to become a short story writer by submitting to these academic journals, and they're not really academic, but they're the main literary journals which are attached to universities. That's the place to try to get serious fiction published. It's just, I don't know how you do it. I submitted to many of those journals for many years and never was published as a short story writer either. But then I tried writing science fiction stories and had some success there. Not right away, but fairly quickly, not in terms of decades anyway, like in terms of years. And so, but if you're aiming to be serious.
You just have to kind of take it into yourself as, well, this is what I do every day. Today I'm going to write 500 words on this project and I'm going to submit to, this journal looks good. So let me get a submission out to that one. and then you just do it every day. It's a job. If I had students, I would tell them, it's not going to work, but you still have to do it, because it trains you to do all of the other things that you need to learn how to do. If it actually does work, you might get a lucky break, or you get a lucky break later on down the line with a small press, because at that point you're going to have to know how to write a synopsis. You're going to have to know how to write a query letter to try to get blurbs. You're going to have to know how to approach a bookstore. You're going to have to know how to talk to publishers. You're going to have to know all these things, because no one's going to do it for you. And sending out submissions, sending out query letters, and just getting rejected over many years trains you to do all that. So that if you have a lucky break, then you'll be ready.
What a beautiful gesture of that teacher of yours to send in a story, right?
Yeah.
Amazing.
He's a short story writer named Frank Sos. He passed away just a couple of years ago. He had a bicycle accident. So he was only 70 years old, and he was still writing. He was terrific. Yes, so that was, I would say, I think over the years I had 4 or 5 stories published. One of them was in a British anthology called Dark Mountain, if you know the Paul Kingsnorth. They did a journal. They might still do it. It's called Dark Mountain. I got a story into that. But yeah, very few. I don't write them anymore, or I haven't since, I would say, like 2010, 2011. I have nothing against short stories. I just haven't had ideas for them. And I figure if I'm going to work on something that's going to take a long time, it's better for me to work on novels. And generally speaking, the fastest I've been able to write a novel is about 3 years, which isn't bad. As novel writing goes, but I just find the novels to be a more productive use of my time. But I still have a few stories that are unpublished, and we'll see. Maybe someday, they see the light of day.
The thing is, my understanding, and I haven't written a short story or had one published since 2011. So actually, there got to be a point for me, if I wrote a short story, I could get it published. But so I haven't written one since 2011. But the problem with it is it really becomes like a matter of establishing some sort of reputation in the small world of editors and short story magazines and things like that. They have to you have to be a known quantity for them to even really read your work. And you still don't get accepted every time.
Right.
That's been my experience. And then and it pays like $200 a story. Or
if you're
like
lucky.
That.
If you're lucky.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
I want to know what Ben's working on now. Enough of this.
Yeah. Sorry.
Well, there are between 4 and 8 books that are done and ready to go.
Oh wow.
The uncertainty in the count results from the fact that one of those books is as long as 5 books. So I'm not sure what my publisher would want to do. It takes a very long time. So the next book should be out next year at some point. Stylistically, it's the opposite of the Parrot. As I mentioned before, it's very stripped down. It's about a young woman whose husband drowns. That doesn't give anything away because you find that out on the first page. It's called Treem, after the surname of the protagonist. And we'll see. I'm right now trying to get blurbs for it, and talking with my publisher about
Is
what
this
you
all
might want to do.
radial books? Because they're
Radial books, yeah, it's a radial with an L.
yeah.
It's a small Seattle-based press. It was started just a few years ago by an old friend of mine. And Doug, what you were talking about is not only true about being a known quantity, but you have to know people too. So that's part of it.
Yeah.
But again,
This is Trisha Yost.
So, I mean, you have to be able to.
Yost.
You write extreme. I'm envious of your ability to write.
Thank
Okay,
you. Thank you.
but no, it's just the observation I was going to make about short stories was that in the middle of the 20th century, early part of the 20th century, reading short stories was like watching television,
Right.
sort of, right? And so writers could get published and paid for their work. By the time you and I were writing short stories, it was already, in terms of just literary fiction, it was a boutique, rarefied
Right.
industry.
Yeah. And when I talk to people about this, it's very difficult to get across in words just how irrelevant the written word is in mainstream American culture. It's not, if you're someone who loves to read and loves books and whose life has been changed by books, and I'm one of those people, you just come to understand after a while that, at least in this country, it's a marginal pursuit. It just is not. There's nothing new about this either. The United States has always been a commercial society. It's anti-literate, anti-intellectual, and if those words can be used without moral content, it just means that it isn't focused. The United States has never been focused on the life of the mind. And one of the most important books that I think anyone could read if they want to understand the cultural aspect of the United States is Anti-Intellectualism in American Life, Richard Hofstadter's book from 1964. And he gives the entire history of this. And what's most fascinating about it, to me anyway, was that he explains why the geography of the country and the patterns of land settlement dictate an anti-intellectual culture, because it kept people moving and unsteady in such a way that was very hostile to the stasis that you need for education. And the time that people spent in school was a direct threat to their daily lives, because they needed to be farming, and they needed to be making money if they weren't farmers just to survive. And so over time, that has never really changed. And you can read de Tocqueville on it if you want to go back to the very earliest days. So if you're a writer and a reader in this country, you just accept after a while, or in my view, you should accept that you're in a small group. When I publish these books, I try to get them to people who might be interested in them. I think sometimes they could be used as good source material for screen adaptations. So when I publish a book, I try to get it to people who might be interested in not just reading it, but using it in other media. But apart from that, you really can't do anything unless you have access to enormous amounts of money. And most people don't. I certainly don't. So
Yeah.
But even as recently as like the 70s or the 60s and 70s, there were books that would get published by a publisher like yours, Radio Press, and then it would catch on with audiences, and then some big New York publisher would come in and acquire the rights and put it out there. Like Tim Robbins is one of these authors who started out as a small press author and then became a nationwide bestseller over time, writing very eccentric and literary satirical books. So I think that I do think that we've seen it. I think the internet must be part of it, but we have seen a decline in the industry. If you look into, I mean, as a publisher, I kind of look into how the big guys are doing it, and it's just across the board collapse. But yeah, so I hope someone makes the canyons and the parrot.
Well, I hope someone makes the parrot. So
I'll do my best.
No, I mean, this would make an amazing kind of like 40-minute film, I think, or maybe longer. But it's just that kind of intensity of the single paragraph breakdown, the panic attack, as you put it. Like,
the special effects aspect of it someone could really run wild with it. And if anyone out the best representation in pop culture that is kind of DMT adjacent, I would say, is a Bjork video called The Gate. It's a song she made called The Gate. And if you Google it up, you'll see the video starts very shroomy. And then after a couple minutes, it becomes crystalline in a way, and she's interacting with a being. And a lot of people have said, hey, this is very DMT-esque. And I think, yeah, maybe so. But yes, it's psychedelia certainly would lend themselves to special effects, in my view. So we'll see.
Well, listen, I want to ask you both to join in on the second conversation. You know, you don't have to stay for the whole thing because they tend to go for quite a while once everyone starts talking. But I also want to point out that I ran the wrong intro to this show. I ran the news intro, and it should have been the art intro. And here is, I'm going to go out with the art intro, which is the same as the outro. And here it is. And I'll see everybody in the Parrot Room for patrons.
Okay.